Hi, this is Dan Hughes, head coach of the Seattle Storm. Thank you for listening to the Crown Refs podcast. Serve the game.
We got to keep running. We may not realize it a little later, but it's going to show up. It's going to show up. Got it? Let's go to work. Close the quarter. Close the quarter. We're all about close the quarter. Scores and stops. There we go.
Well, Dan Hughes seeking his first championship, the third winningest coach in WNBA history. He took over a group that last year won 11 fewer games than what he was able to do with his squad this season, adding Jordan Canada and Natasha Howard, and he's had the right voice for this team, utilizing the leadership of Sue Bird and working beautifully in concert with one another. The Seattle Storm have climbed back to the mountaintop. They are your 2018 WNBA champions. Title number 3 for Sue Bird and the Seattle Storm franchise.
Coach, you have a very impressive track record with over 20 years coaching experience in the WNBA. Got your start in 1999. You've won a championship, two-time Coach of the Year. You've coached star players. So what are some of the key factors that's contributed to your longevity and success as a coach?
Well, I think relationships. I mean, I don't care whether you're in basketball or officiating or in business. If you have the ability to have relationships, and specifically long-term relationships, it's such a plus because it allows you to, sometimes have a career in what you're doing, and so I think it's been about relationships, because that's the thing I honestly, when I reflect on coaching and my teams, that's where I go to.
Definitely helps build your chemistry, right?
Yeah. And I think, if you're about relationships, you're often about empowering others. And I think, when you're self-serving, you probably have a shelf life. I think if you're an empowering type of presence, then I think, man, you can see different generations, kind of play out.
There's such a difference between, being in power and trying to get control of power, and, like you said, empowering you, being like the vehicle and the catalyst for others around you to grow. Similar to, what I'm trying to do with officiating. I know it's always great to hear from a coach off the court. We don't necessarily love hearing from them on the court all the time, although, we know it's part of the game and we enjoy the challenge, but just the fact that we kind of have you, I like picking a coach's brain to hear their officiating perspective. I think it's very valuable. So I want to tap into that. So thank you for allowing, access. Let me ask you this. How do you identify a great official? What are the qualities that help you separate and differentiate officials from one another?
I think, to be honest with you, that has evolved over my career. I think I have a much better position to evaluate an official right now. For whatever reason, my career has taken me to a better point. So it is not something that I have always been good at doing. I'm not sure I'm great at doing it right now, but what I would say is that, if I feel like they manage the game well, and by manage, I mean calls are communicated. They follow a sense of logic. We're watching the game play, and I'm not one that's just really looking for somebody to find this minute, strange call, to show that somehow the presence of that. I kind of like somebody who manages the game, moves, the communication is efficient back and forth. They understand that I have a job to do and they have a job to do. But when the game's managed pretty well, that really sends me to a way better place as a coach.
Just looking for official to be approachable and consistent on both ends.
Yeah. And that's really well said. The consistency. I will adjust early in a game as an official, no question, if I feel like it's on both ends of the court. And I'll coach my team that way. Where you probably hear from me is when two things happen. When I'm looking and trying to interpret one end and it doesn't make sense to the other end. And so now I'm frustrated coaching my team. And the second thing is the communication factor. I think officials that communicate with me, and quite honestly, I am better in my communication over this last 2 or 3 years than I had been probably the first 17. But that communication factor can disarm me almost instantly if it's done effectively.
It's interesting. One of the main responses, or a very common response I hear from coaches is, you got to call the same thing. The same thing happened on this end, and now the same thing's happening again, and you're not calling it. And I'm always like, Coach, I respect that. I understand you think it's the same. I don't think it's ever the same. It may be similar plays, but never the exact same play you're going to see on the other end. So, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. And to be honest with you, coaching is like officiating. It's not easy. Those are two jobs that are tough. They're hard. And some of the more veteran officials that deal with me or have dealt with me repetitively, like I've had some officials that have probably worked for me almost 20 years. Now, that's a long time. That's a long time. But a lot of the really good ones have kind of figured out, okay, if he's this way and I'm this way, then maybe there's a good chance that he'll be this way the rest of the way. And they literally disarm me with humor sometimes. They disarm me with honesty. If they tell me, I'm not sure I got that right, but I'm going to go look, I probably am going to move on,
right.
To be honest with you. So they've learned that art too.
I'm sure you've built quite a rapport coaching alongside, 20 years working with officials. So it's interesting to hear your answer about what stands out positively in your mind. I want to reverse that question to you. This might be a little bit easier for you to answer. What are some things you like least about what an official does? I don't like cute calls. I don't like calls that probably. Did you say cute? Cute?
Yeah, there's a this thing happened, and it's not obvious to me. It's not obvious to the other coach. It's not obvious to the fans.
A game interrupter.
Huh?
A game interrupter. Something.
Yeah. Yeah, that one really I struggle with, and so when everybody's kind of surprised by a call, that probably is a difficult thing for me to take as a coach, sometimes, in regard to that.
I'm right there with you. One of the things I can't stand the most about my performance is when I call a cheapie. When I stop the game, press the stop button on the game when the game did not need to stop. So, I agree. Those are frustrated on both sides from coaches and from officials. We as officials all command varying levels of respect in the eyes of the coaches and the players. And the more command that we can produce, the more respect that we're going to receive. And I'm sure coaches can recognize that about us, which helps them pick their spots on what to say to who. I know there've been plenty of times where I've been intimidated on the court by a coach, fearful of the interaction. So from a coach's perspective, when can you sense an official is weak, nervous, or easily intimidated?
That's a really good question. When I see them working with their crew, and I can see that there is just not a chemistry. You know, when I see somebody feeling the need to call a play that logically is overreaching.
Gotcha.
And when I don't feel like they're working together in certain ways, I'm not a big fan of people. I like the officials to get it right, but I really don't want to see a scenario where there's multiple times that an official is corrected when they're in the best position to see the play. And you know, coaches are probably like me. They don't always know the rules. They don't always know exactly where you're looking all the time.
Right.
So there's some of that, but we kind of know who's close and who has great vision of that. And I like crews that they all kind of carry their weight, and they may at halftime have a discussion, but man, as clean as it can be during the game, where we're not having that on the court all the time, the happier I probably am as a coach.
You know, we as officials focus in on that a lot, and that's called staying in your primary, right? We all have a portion of the court that we cover. And when we come out of our primary and make a secondary whistle, our percentages drop very low. So it's interesting that on the flip side of that, you're recognizing that as well. So when it comes from out of their primary to get a whistle, that wakes you up, raises your awareness?
It does. And you know what really helped me was I had been at San Antonio for like 12 years. And it started a progression to where I'm at now, I think, where I am better understanding officials. I am less frustrated, but I hired an official to talk to me after every game.
Wow.
So he watched the game as an official watching the game. And then he talked to me about the game. You know, he made several points about my players. He made points about me. He made points about, no, that's a correct call, coach, or no, I see you had a point here. But it started me thinking clinically about the art of officiating as opposed to emotionally.
Right.
That I spent most of my career as a coach.
Wow, that's really impressive that you would do that. That must have been quite a learning experience for you. It definitely helped shape you. I'm sure you're way ahead of other coaches if you've gotten that training.
Well, it really helped me. I have probably cut my technicals into, I probably averaged 5 a year to, I think I was one game I got a T in last year, and then one game the year before. So it's changed my frustration. Now, don't clap at me too much. I got a second one last year.
The numbers are still good though.
Yeah, way better. Yeah. But partially because, you know, and you could argue I have a better team I'm coaching, and sometimes we exemplify. I very early in my time at Seattle, I was up dialoguing on a call, and Breonna Stewart, who was the MVP of the league, said to me, "Coach, we really need you here." And it changed me. It's like, you know what? They need me to be a coach here. They don't need me on the edge of getting us in trouble or me getting thrown out. And she said that to me, and I'll tell you, it had a dramatic effect on how I handle frustrating situations.
Yeah, it came off a little bit differently than if officials said that to you, that your star player kind of like woke you up, right?
Yeah, but players, you know, what I've noticed with officials is that the supervisors and people that are in charge, they're important. They're important. They're like a coach. They help create a culture.
Absolutely.
That comes across, you know. And I had one year I was in between jobs, and I was hired by the Mid-American Conference, the MAC, to be their first assistant commissioner of basketball. And the commissioner removed the official assigner and asked me to do it. So I had to assign officials for a 13, 14 team league back at the time. But it really gave me a look at officiating differently, and the reality of the world of what the officials have to do to put their schedule together and, you know, and be a big time official.
It's too bad you're not assigning now. I'd fly out to your camp.
No, I was not real good. You know, I did that for 1 year and went back to coaching. I think I'm doing the right thing. I don't think that was my calling.
That's interesting. That's great. You know, a big portion of the content I produce is geared towards improving the communication aspect of this game, because I believe it is the hardest skill set to pick up. And let's be honest, there's no rule book, there's no instructions manual on how we can improve. So it's very challenging at times. In your opinion, what aspect of communication do you think officials can do a better job at?
I think humor.
I've mentioned that before. I've mentioned
that really works. That really works with me. You know, if I feel, and I don't take, I'm not sarcastic about it. If you're, you know, if you have enough presence to let me kind of maybe initially start down a road, okay, and then you talk to me like we're both going to work this out, or you bring humor to it, I have learned to, okay, I don't have to be, my trouble a lot of times is demonstrative. I've never sworn an official in all those years. Never. I have never sworn at an official.
I respect that.
But I've been very demonstrative. You know, I have a very commanding voice.
A long wingspan.
Oh, I do. And people hear me at the other end and all that kind of stuff. But humor really works with me. And I can see some of the officials have talked to each other because, and I think I've honestly improved a little bit of my communication to them in a more open way. But humor does that for me. The ability to okay, I start down a road, but then I start to correct myself. And then they just kind of talk to me, you know, because I really talk less to the officials than I had in my earlier years. And sometimes I am going to probably be emotional, but very quickly, I don't want to stay emotional. I kind of want to get back to where we're talking to each other. And that's what I've learned, because I wasn't very good in that at the early years. And there's probably a lot of us like that.
I respect that answer. Appreciate you telling me that.
Well, and even, you know, even as a coach, there's times like I make decisions that don't turn out right, you know. And those of us that have been in a career a long time, we know that kind of happens, you know. And sometimes an official say, you know, I'll check that one. You know, I maybe I didn't get that right. You know, I am not going to pounce on that and go crazy. I'm going to kind of understand that as a professional who's been in it a lot of times. You know, I'll make play calls with players, and some of the better players will look at me like, you know, what? You know, and we get that, and I get that way better now about officials. So if they say that to me, probably the conversation's over and I'm to the next play.
What responses do you dislike hearing from officials?
An absolute assurance that they got it right,
mm-hmm. Okay.
and that I'm wrong. You know, I struggle with that. You know, I struggle more where I see players are getting frustrated and the official is not intercepting that frustration, you know, with a conversation or something, you know. Through the years, I've had honestly very few players get technicals, really argue in a demonstrative way. I really haven't. I've probably been the one that's been more that way, but I want to see them work, especially if it's a quality player with a good reputation. I kind of want to see them hear out the player, move the player on, let me coach the player, but if I see a level of constant frustration and no communication, and I'm talking about professionals and I'm talking about older players, that's hard for me, because now it's harder for me to coach that player because they seem to be in a frustrated moment.
Understandable. The flip side of that is, players' frustrations, it can become constant at times. And a lot of times they lose focus on actually just playing the game, and their focus and attention turns to the officiating and what happened on the previous possession. Now, do you think that's somewhat counterproductive to winning?
Absolutely. I'll coach players to eliminate that. I don't know how much officials realize that, but I can tell, and you know what? The players can tell when it affects me as I've gotten older. They know when that I have to move on, and I know it to them too. And I don't like players that complain early, and so as an official, I may live with some up and down things in regard, because I kind of want to get to the point in the game that really matters and make sure I got enough data to substantiate that I got a problem. And I want the players to be the same. I really don't like players begging for calls. I will coach that. I will coach that a lot. I really don't like good players begging for calls. I just do not. And so, I think it can affect your performance, and I will definitely coach that in a player.
Yeah, just tell me a little bit more about the advice that you give to players on how to effectively deal with the officials. What do your conversations sound like?
Well, and I don't want this taken wrong, but a really good player, I'm like, get through this, keep playing. The calls will come back to you, especially when we get to important parts of the game. They'll get it right in that point, because they got enough data that they know what you're dealing with. If you're getting held, you're getting bumped, all those kinds of things. And a player who may want to be getting off to a good start, they may start complaining, and I really don't see the benefit in their relationship with the officials if they're coming out of the gate begging for calls. Because if they're really good, there'll be enough data that the officials will realize, what, they're holding here, or they got hands on here, and it'll show up in the second half or third quarter or fourth quarter, whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're giving them enough data, in regard to it. And I do coach that. I do that, but I also find my really good players, they get that too. And they don't want me in the first quarter, and I probably did this too much in my earlier years, but they don't really want me in dialogue with the officials all that much, and let the officials get enough data that they figure out what's going on, and then we'll be fine. And I'm kind of the same way with them.
But same thing with us. When we get something wrong, just like you said, move on. Next play mentality. We can't think about the missed hand check or the block charge we got wrong 3 possessions ago, because then we're going to mess up on an upcoming possession.
Well, in the video era that we're really in, there's a lot good with that, but boy, there's a lot too where, it creates a perfection that either I'm looking at as a coach and expecting, or the officials are, they're graded, or it seems to me as a coach sometimes they're graded on almost every call. And so we all react to that kind of pressure a little differently. I got to get this next one right, and so then you sometimes you get a trend that as a coach you're trying to make sense of, in regard to it. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but and sometimes, we'll turn in plays and I will have looked at it, but I'm looking at it through my eyes. I'm looking at it through my eyes. And what really helped me was understanding how an official is trained and kind of what they're looking at as priorities in that decision. Because honestly, a lot of us coaches, we don't know that.
You guys got enough to worry about.
We don't. Yeah, we don't. We don't, and probably never will, to be honest with you.
Just like officials don't know the ins and outs of coaching, because if we knew too much of that, we're probably not going to be that good on this side.
Yeah, you as a coach know you're preparing for teams that maybe you played those coaches multiple times, and you kind of know they try to beat up this player, because they think that player won't play through some of the physicality. They'll hold in some off the ball situations and force the officials to make calls before they get to that. And we come in with that mindset, but I've tried to kind of throw that away and just be in the moment of the game and not, but I'm just here to tell you, players feel that way, coaches feel that way. I'm playing this team, they do this to me, they do this to us, and we've got to like a zero, kind of tolerance right there, because we're coming in expecting that. Now, that's not the best way to come in, but I am telling you that that is part of the way players and coaches think.
That's interesting, because, when I'm speaking to other officials, I'm always telling them it's great to have all the information and be aware of matchups and size differences and records and all that stuff. But the more information you bring in, it's going to kind of cloud your judgment, and you're going to come in expecting one thing when it could be a totally different than what happened the previous matchup. So just like next possession, new possession, we're trying to not have the emotion of prior games that, come in. Like I said, it's good to know. We don't want to eliminate that information, but sometimes knowing too much for an official can get us into trouble.
That's well said. I think you want to do your homework like we all do, but you have to have an open mind. The great thing about this sport is the uniqueness of every game.
100%. Absolutely. Let's talk about technical fouls and the psychology leading up to one. Let me ask you this. Do coaches care about getting technical fouls, or is it done on purpose? Just give me your take on technical fouls.
Yes and yes. I mean, I think there are times that we know we're pushing the envelope and we feel like it's worthwhile. Other times, and I'm thinking, I mean, most of the time, in maybe the last couple years, I've been really better about it. But before that, my mindset was probably nervous and anxious, and sometimes I was, too involved without real strategy. I was driven by emotions as opposed to driven by, a progressive fact. But I think it's both of those things. Right now, I don't want to get technical. I somewhere in my career, you as you're growing up, you might think, well, I got a T there, and it somehow impacted the game, in a positive way. But boy, that's not where I landed after all these years. I have not. I really don't. It's like fouling. I don't like fouling. My teams almost every year are one or two and least amount fouls, and it's not because.
That's because you hired a referee coach to go train you on what illegal contact was.
Well, and the players know. I just, there's a sense out there that fouling is okay sometimes. Well, I have never found value in fouling. Never. I want to win games because my team gets fouled more and gets to the free throw line, and I don't foul. And I can't always control depending on your talent level, how many times I get to the line. But I can control pretty good with my teams how much I foul. And that's been important to me, and it's been a difference maker to me.
I'm just curious, how do you go about coaching defense and letting your players know what is legal, what is not? What is that? What are those conversations like?
Well, in the practice,
yeah,
you know, everything to me comes from the practice floor and how you react to certain things. You know, and there's a difference to me, for example, in a player, what they do with their feet. If they're trying to get to a position and they foul, probably not going to hear a great deal from me. But what they do with their hands drives me absolutely crazy. And in the practice situation, they will hear it almost every time. I don't want them reaching. You know, if they're beat, I don't want that reaction. I want a team rotation reaction. I don't want you to make it worse. I don't, you know, I kind of learn which players can block shots a little. I'm not a big shot blocker kind of defensive coach by and large, but I get to a point where I kind of understand some people are good at it, and I certainly take advantage of that. But I coach the feet. I coach the feet, and the hands almost always just get us in trouble, and they kind of know that about our system.
Gotcha. You guys talk about verticality a lot?
We do, and I can almost, in any practice, tell you there's going to be a response from the head coach when there's a foul frustration. You know, somebody beats you, you're reacting to a missed shot at the other end, you're trying to do too much, and I coach the heck out of those situations. You know, the players know that just compounds the issue. I might deal with them getting beat to places that we try to protect, and I might not say a word. I you know, occasionally I will, but not always. But if they do that and then they take a swipe at the ball, there's just going to be a reaction that we don't do that.
What do you think coaches can do better at managing in-game interactions with officials? Just as a whole, generally speaking.
Yeah. The other coaches that I watch, and even in myself, if the dialogue is a communication that is spoken as opposed to yelled, that I have the patience to wait till I'm in a position to truly talk to the official, and I'm not necessarily scooting down the sidelines and yelling at somebody on the baseline. That's hard for a coach, because you're anxious, and you know, it's the way you coach. You coach in the immediate moment, and you're trying to communicate in the immediate moment. But if we would just have the patience, the officials are pretty good. If you approach an official about a play, they probably know which one you're talking. You know, the level of officials I've dealt with, they know. And even if it's not the next play or that immediate moment, if I'll just wait and have a dialogue, and I've tried to learn to ask the right questions. You know, what did you see? What was the priority there? You know, not like, man, terrible call. Yeah. That really isn't going to create a dialogue that makes either of us better. And I'm sure I've said that a lot, but I've also talked with other coaches over the last few years, and they, you know, and I've tried to learn what to say so that the official can kind of give you an idea of the priorities that he or she went through in making that decision.
So how would you word, like, let's say we had a missed call on one end and you wanted to approach me and ask me about that. What would that sound like?
Well, I'd probably say, you know, what did you see? You know, what caused that to be a block as opposed to a charge? You know, yeah. I'm a little more specific. If there's something I want to raise, you know, do you think they got there? You know, were their feet outside the restricted area, you know, a little more of a question that truly has some meat to it, as opposed to just a reaction to the frustration of the call going the other way. And in some cases, you know, I learn a little bit kind of about their processing, and maybe I can coach that a little bit, you know, with my team.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Just asking questions. I respect that. I know we're trained to answer questions, right? It's not like you get unlimited questions throughout the whole entire game, but if you're coming at us with respectful questions and you really want to know what we thought, then we're going to answer you all day. It's just probably addressing the comments and the constant comments, you know, where you're not you, but, you know, coaches shout out their opinion on the play, when half the time we don't even have the time to answer them at that moment, you know? So just, you know, the main thing with officials is just trying to promote that two-way respect. I would never come into your huddle and shout, "Coach, how could you run that play?" So it's like when officials, you know, shout the same thing to us, that's not the two-way respect. So a lot of my responses with coaches, I generally wind up not even talking about the play. I wind up talking about the way we're talking about the play. And then, you know, later on, if we can get to the play, that's great. But I just think to establish that communication respect, then we're going to actually work together and be able to collaborate and have good conversations, you know? So I just try to keep that in check first, but that's great. If the coach is going to ask questions, we're obligated to answer that.
Well, there's a lot of officials that would tell you I wasn't that way. And I'm kind of sad about that, but sometimes you're always trying to get better. And whether you believe it or not, people that stay in things long times, they're kind of working at it. And there was a switch in the moment with me that allowed me to realize that this was not healthy, you know, to be that, and what we are is nervous, what we are is anxious, you know, those kind of things, you know, that, and especially with teams, you know, sometimes having coached a lot of years, I've had really good teams, and I've had teams that were average, and I've had teams that, man, I just about felt like I got to do, everything's got to kind of go right, you know, for me to have success. But you're not very effective as a coach, either with your team or with the officials, if you're feeling like every call has got to be perfect in your eyes. You're not going to coach well, and your relationship with officials is not very good. And I have kind of learned that, but I went through periods where I probably wasn't very good.
Listen, we're all growing. What happened in the past is the past, you know, as long as we could all move forward and keep it positive. I got an idea for you for a great response if you want to get the attention of an official in a positive way.
Okay.
Give them a compliment on a call that went against you. Then the next thing you have to say, they're going to be eyes wide open and listening to everything you want to say. I know I'm always caught off guard. It's happened like 2 or 3 times in my life, but like a coach will say, "Hey, that was a really good call," when I just called a charge against his team. So the next time he called me over, I'm running over to him. You know, like, he built that rapport with me. It was a respectful line. It raised my attention and awareness. Also, when coaches thank you after you give them a response, or, you know, I really appreciate that. These little things go a long way, because, you know, we're used to hearing a lot of negativity. So if you can inject some positivity in there, it's going to be very effective.
Well, you know, I've dealt with officials for, oh my gosh, I mean, some of them 15, 20 years, you know, and good officials, you know, but there's probably going to be a point where you've seen each other so much, you know, that, and I remember once, it was an official and I were kind of working through things a little bit, and there was a call late in the game. We had to lead, but there was a call that I didn't like. And I said something like, I don't know. I'm not a very sarcastic coach. That's not how I am. I'm not that way as a person, but this had a lot of sarcasm, and the official kind of looked at me like, really? And I felt, you know what? It destroyed me. The game was over, and I always go down and shake the other coach's hand, but I went straight to the official and I said, you know, I was wrong. I was wrong. And luckily the official had great presence. It's okay, Dan. You know, we're good. Then I went and the official, the other coach who I know really good, just looking at me like, wow. But I felt horrible. I felt horrible at that point. But I was so glad I did that, because you know, we had the official several times, and we had been up and down, and we just kind of gotten to a better place. And then I make this stupid, sarcastic remark, and then, but I say that to him, and then we just finished the season great. You know, I had him several times, and it was great. And we make mistakes, and sometimes if we just own up, you know, because we're going to see each other, especially in a league like mine.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned sarcasm, and there's really no place in it in basketball. I'm very sarcastic off the court, extremely, but I've found it's just not effective in basketball. You know, even when I hear a coach, like, he'll make a sarcastic line, I'm like turned off. Meanwhile, like off the court, if you would have said that, I would have laughed with you. But yeah, there's just really no place for it.
No, I don't use it in coaching my players, and I really don't use it much at all in regard. You know, I find the humor. I'm like everybody else. I watch a comedian or something, or somebody will say something to me and it kind of fits. It just doesn't fit this persona.
Right. Well, this is great, Coach. I think you're providing like so much value for the officials. Like I said, we rarely get access to a high level coach like this, like yourself, and just being able to pick your brain and just hear the coach's perspective is very, very helpful. Is there anything else that you'd like to say with regards to officiating and kind of bridging the gap between coaches, players, and referees?
No, I just think, like a lot of things in our world, communication, the ability to feel what the other person is feeling. You know, we coaches need it, and I think officials too, because I think it tends to diffuse and allow for a reality of two hard jobs going on at the same time. And, you know, I would not want to be an official. I know how hard they have to work. I know how difficult it is. And I have better relations now than I probably ever have in my career with officials, because I've gotten to a point where I see both sides better. And when I was younger, all I knew was I was trying to keep my job and win enough games that some administrator didn't have the ability to fire me. And now I look at it differently, but I'm older, and that's the only thing I would share. I'd share the same thing with a coach too.
Yeah, that ability to have empathy really can empower your relationships and improve them.
It actually can improve, and that's the key. It's actually, everybody ends up doing a better job, because if you create that, the same with a player. You don't have good communication with a player and they feel like they've got to do something incredibly special as opposed to just being the best version of themselves, you don't always get a very good performance, you know, and it's the same thing, I think, in those relationships. What you really want is a good performance as a coach and a good performance as an official, and then the players kind of decide the game. And that's how I kind of see it.
Well said, Coach. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Coach. I'm going to edit this and I'll send it over to you. Would you mind like sharing it with whoever you want to share it with?
I'd be glad to. People will love that I did this, and good for you. Good for you. We need a lot of things right now, and this is a good one. All right.
Thanks again, Coach. Take care and best of luck this upcoming season. I'll be watching and rooting for you.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Crown Refs podcast. Serve the game.